What requires more psychological endurance? Surviving a sudden, horrific tragedy that catches you completely off guard, or knowing exactly what day a tragedy will strike, like 30 years in advance, and having to simply sit and wait for it?
God, it's the ultimate question of human resilience, isn't
It
it?
really is.
Because a sudden trauma forces you into shock.
Yeah,
Your biology just takes over. You rely on adrenaline, on the pure animal instinct to survive the next 10 seconds.
right. Your body just does the work for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anticipating a trauma, watching it walk toward you for 3 decades, that requires a conscious, daily, agonizing choice not to run away.
Welcome to this deep dive. I want you to just take a second, wherever you are right now. Maybe you're commuting, or maybe you're just wrapping up your day.
Just slow down for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Just slow down, take a breath. We are looking at a piece of writing today that requires completely different gear than we usually use.
It's a heavy one today.
It is. We have a short, intensely poetic reflection in our stack of sources titled A Mother Watching. And I want to be incredibly clear right at the top about our mission here.
Right, because this could easily go in a different direction.
Totally. We are not here to debate theology. We aren't charting out historical timelines or, debating archaeological evidence.
The focus here is strictly on the mind, the human nervous system.
Yes.
We are taking a universally known figure, Mary, and approaching her from a completely vulnerable, profoundly human perspective. We're exploring the universal themes of parenthood, the crushing weight of foresight, and really what happens to a human being when unconditional love is tethered to an inevitable, extremely difficult destiny.
Usually when we look back at history, especially at these massive world-altering figures,
Right.
we put this enormous buffer of distance between us and them.
Oh, absolutely. It's a protective measure.
Right. It feels like you're walking through a grand, hushed museum. You see the ancient oil painting, the perfect golden halo, the serene, totally unbothered posture.
Not a hair out of place.
Exactly. And the little brass plaque just points and says, there they are. It's safe. It's clean.
But we do that on purpose, Elevating a historical or religious figure into a two-dimensional symbol, it's a psychological defense mechanism.
A defense mechanism? How so?
Well, if we keep her safely behind museum glass as a symbol of pure grace or ultimate obedience, we never actually have to reckon with her fear.
Oh, wow.
We don't have to process her panic or her crushing uncertainty. Symbols are comforting because they don't have nervous systems.
Right. They don't feel pain.
Exactly. They don't wake up in a cold sweat at 2 in the morning wondering how they're going to survive the next day.
The very first lines of this text grab you by the shoulders and demand that you shatter that museum glass. It says, you ever think about what it felt like to be Mary, not as a figure in a story, not as a symbol, but as a mother?
The instruction there is explicitly clear. Stop admiring the idea and look directly at the person.
Which is so hard to do.
It is incredibly difficult for us to do. Because empathy requires cognitive load. Reverence doesn't.
Oh, say that again. That's really profound.
Reverence is easy. Empathy takes work. It is so much easier to revere a symbol than to empathize with a terrified mother. Because when you strip away the iconography, you are left with the raw, beating heart of a deeply vulnerable human being.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think we need an analogy here. Think about looking at a majestic, finished marble statue in a town square.
Sure.
It's smooth, it represents a grand triumph or, a noble sorrow, but it is totally cold to the touch.
Yeah.
It's the finished product of historical consensus. That's the figure in a story.
I like that. The marble is the history we agree on.
Right. But what this source text is asking us to do is to look away from that polished marble statue and instead force ourselves to read the artist's messy, tear-stained, frantic diary entries that were scribbled down in real time while they were trying to sculpt it.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
We are looking at the messy process, not the clean conclusion.
Because the marble statue gives us the luxury of the finish line. We know how the story ends, so we project that ending backward onto her entire life.
We assume she always knew it would be okay.
Exactly. But when you look at her strictly as a mother living in the present tense, she doesn't have the luxury of the finish line. She is navigating the terrifying, chaotic present.
And if we are going to establish her as a deeply human mother rather than a distant, floating concept, we naturally have to look at the incredibly normal, intimate moments that grounded her reality.
Because she didn't just wake up every day to a grand abstract destiny.
Right. She lived a daily, physical life. Which brings us right to the milestones of early motherhood that the text focuses on next. The imagery here is so specific.
It really grounds the whole piece.
It does. It says, she held him when he was a baby, watched him take his first steps, heard his first words. To her, he wasn't just the son of God, he was her son.
The psychological juxtaposition in those lines is just staggering.
It gives you whiplash.
It really does. The text takes this cosmos-shifting title, Son of God, and places it right alongside the most ordinary, intimate milestones of human development.
Holding an infant.
Watching clumsy, unsteady first steps,
Mm.
hearing a child babble.
It completely anchors the divine in the gritty physical world. I mean, we talk about historical destinies, but before any of that happened, there were dirty diapers.
And sleepless nights.
There was the sheer panic of a toddler walking toward a sharp coffee table corner. There were late-night feedings and just bone-deep exhaustion.
And those ordinary moments are exactly how the neurobiology of attachment works.
I mean,
Well, you don't fall in love with the concept. You fall in love through the physical release of oxytocin when a tiny hand wraps around your finger.
oh, right, the biology of it.
Yeah. By highlighting these specific firsts, the text emphasizes that her maternal attachment was deeply physically rooted. He isn't a theology to her. He is flesh and blood.
I have to pause and push back on this a little bit, though,
Okay, go for it.
because we are dealing with a totally unique situation of foreknowledge here. She knows there's a divine nature to this child. She knows he is fundamentally different.
Right, she had the warning.
Exactly. So I have a hard time buying that this foreknowledge is entirely a curse. I mean, if you know the ultimate outcome of your child's life is divine victory, doesn't that act as a psychological safety net?
You're thinking it would make it easier.
Yeah, I'd argue it might take the sting out of the day-to-day risks. If he's the son of God, maybe she didn't worry as much when he tripped and fell.
That assumes the human brain operates on pure logic, which we know it absolutely doesn't,
Fair point.
especially the mammalian brain of a parent. The physical reality of a child's vulnerability will always override abstract theological knowledge.
So the body wins out over the brain.
Every time. When you hold an infant, your sensory input, the fragility of their neck, the softness of their skin, it screams that they are entirely dependent on you for survival.
Yeah, you feel how breakable they are.
Exactly. And if you know this child is destined for something massive and world-altering, feeling their physical fragility wouldn't be a comfort. It would be an absolute terror.
Okay, I see what you're saying, because you see the immediate fragility right in front of you.
Right.
I remember watching my toddler climb up this slightly damp, totally unsafe jungle gym for the first time. My brain instantly mapped out about 12 different fatal trajectories.
And that's just a neighborhood playground.
Right, not a cosmic destiny.
Exactly. Every time he stumbled taking a first step, it was a visceral reminder to her of his physical capacity to bleed, to be bruised, to feel pain.
Oh, man.
The title, Son of God, implies an ultimate invulnerability.
Yeah.
But the reality of her son taking clumsy first steps proves his immediate agonizing vulnerability.
So the text is forcing us to recognize that her love was rooted in the physical reality of a body she had cared for since it was completely helpless.
Yes.
That line, he wasn't just the son of God, he was her son. It completely reclaims him for her.
It's very possessive.
It is. The world claims him as a savior, a deity, the pivot point of human history, but the mother claims him simply as hers. There is this fierce, almost defiant possession in that line.
I love that. Defiant possession.
Before he belonged to the entire world, he belonged to her.
And that profound sense of possession is what makes the psychological burden she carried so devastating.
Because she knows she can't keep him.
Right. Because those tender, beautifully ordinary moments weren't lived in a vacuum of blissful ignorance. They were constantly overshadowed by a heavy, quiet realization.
The source material lays out this tension so starkly. It says, and yet she knew. She knew he was meant for something bigger, something she couldn't stop.
It's just brutal.
It asks the reader directly, can you imagine loving someone and knowing one day you'd have to let them go? Not because you want to, but because it's part of something greater.
What's fascinating here is this brings us to the specific anatomy of her pain. We're talking about anticipatory grief.
Anticipatory grief, okay.
We often think of foresight as a gift, like, if only I had known.
All right, if I had a crystal ball.
But in the context of maternal love, when that foresight involves suffering for your child, it functions like a biological mechanism gone completely rogue.
Let's unpack anticipatory grief, actually. How does that actually work in the brain?
Think of it like your psychological immune system going into hyperdrive to fight off a virus that hasn't even entered the body yet.
Oh, wow. So you're fighting a ghost.
Exactly. You are mourning a loss that is still years in the future, but because you know it is inevitable, your brain starts processing the grief in the present tense.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The prolonged inflammation from that constant state of hyperalertness actually does immense damage to the system.
Yep.
Most parents experience the letting go of a child as a gradual, developmentally appropriate process.
Sure, they go to school, they move out.
Right. It's bittersweet, but it's natural.
What the text describes is a totally different phenomenon. It's a letting go forced by something greater, and crucially, it's something she couldn't stop.
It's an unnatural severing.
It reminds me of the parents of a frontline soldier or a deeply committed political activist in a hostile regime. You watch your child grow up, and they decide to take on a noble but incredibly dangerous path.
Oh, that's a perfect parallel. The cognitive dissonance there is staggering.
It really is. As a parent, you would feel this immense, swelling pride in their moral courage.
Of course.
But warring constantly against that pride is the nauseating, terrifying knowledge that they belong to the cause now, not just to your family.
You lose your claim on them.
Right. You know, their calling puts them in the direct path of violence. You love them desperately, but you have to watch them walk straight into the fire.
And you can't pull them back. Because stopping them would be stopping them from being exactly who they are meant to be.
You'd be destroying them to save them.
That is the agonizing surrender highlighted in the text. Not because you want to, but because it's part of something greater. It requires a human being to hold two completely contradictory truths simultaneously.
The urge to protect and the need to let go.
Yes, the biological imperative to protect you at all costs, clashing directly with the spiritual imperative to let you walk toward pain. The psychological energy required to sustain that contradiction without completely breaking down is immense.
Because the core drive of a parent is to protect the offspring from harm, to keep them close and safe.
It's our most basic instinct.
Her reality requires her to actively suppress her own biological drive. And, the text doesn't let her off the hook by suggesting she was just perfectly at peace with this.
No, it doesn't sugarcoat it at all.
It doesn't paint her as smiling serenely while suppressing her maternal instincts. It moves directly into the physical, visceral toll this anxiety took on her.
Because the brain cannot sustain that level of cognitive dissonance indefinitely. It inevitably leaks out physiologically.
The body keeps the score, right?
Always. The abstract concept of foreknowledge naturally manifests into intense external anxiety, particularly when the defenses are down, like at night.
Listen to how the text captures this. There must have been nights she stayed awake, wondering how it would all unfold. Moments she wanted to protect him, like any mother would, but she couldn't. Because his path was never meant to be easy.
That word unfold is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Right. The word that really catches me is unfold. She was wondering how it would all unfold.
That word pinpoints a very specific type of neurological terror. It is the terror of ambiguous threat.
Ambiguous threat.
Yes. When you know a path isn't easy, but you lack the exact granular details of the hardships to come, the brain's threat detection system goes haywire.
Because it's trying to fill in the blanks.
Precisely. She knows the overarching destiny involves suffering, but she doesn't know the day-to-day mechanisms of how that suffering will arrive.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's the difference between knowing someone is going to punch you in the face in exactly 5 seconds versus knowing someone is going to punch you in the face sometime in the next 10 years.
That is a terrifying thought experiment.
Right. If you don't know the how or the when, your brain turns everything into a potential threat.
Every shadow is a monster.
Exactly. Every footstep, every sideways glance from a stranger in the market, every rumor.
And the helplessness embedded in that waiting is suffocating. As the text explicitly states, her core instinct to protect him was completely thwarted. Moments she wanted to protect him, but she couldn't.
It's so absolute. She couldn't.
And this isn't a failure of her maternal willpower. It is a structural reality of his destiny. His path was never meant to be easy. Therefore, her path as his mother was guaranteed to be agonizing.
She's trapped in his narrative.
Right. We talk about learned helplessness in psychology, which is a state where an animal endures repeated painful stimuli which it is unable to escape or avoid.
Like they just give up.
Yes. But this is worse. This is forced surrender. She isn't failing to escape. She's actively choosing not to, despite knowing the pain is coming.
I want you listening to this to really consider that distinction. Think about the difference between pain that catches you completely by surprise versus pain you have to watch slowly approaching from a distance over years.
It's a completely different kind of endurance.
Sudden pain requires shock survival. It's pure adrenaline, you just react. But anticipating an uneasy path, watching hardships slowly stalk your child for 30 years, doesn't that require a totally unimaginable type of strength?
It really does. Sudden trauma activates the fight-or-flight response.
Hmm.
It's acute. Anticipating trauma over a lifetime is chronic.
It wears you down to the bone.
It is a slow, grinding erosion of the nervous system. To lie awake at night wondering how it would all unfold means she lived the trauma 1,000 times in her own mind before it ever actually materialized in reality.
She was pre-living the worst-case scenarios.
Which is something we all do.
Sure, every parent does that. But for most of us, those scenarios are irrational fears fueled by anxiety. For her, the fears were rational.
They were guaranteed.
Yeah. And returning to the concept of helplessness, humans can endure immense suffering if they feel they retain some agency, like some way to fight back, to advocate, to mitigate the damage.
Right, if you can do something, you feel better.
But total helplessness, sitting on the sidelines while your child walks a treacherous path, that breeds a profound internal despair.
Which is exactly why the next pivot in the source text is so incredibly powerful.
Because she doesn't stay in that despair.
No. Despite this chronic anxiety, despite the terrifying anticipation and the total stripping of her agency, the text focuses on her behavioral response. It focuses on what she actually did in the face of all this.
She didn't dissociate.
She didn't run away.
She didn't abandon the situation to save her own psyche from the wreckage.
The text says, and still she stayed. Through the whispers, through the doubts, through the pain.
And still she stayed. Those 5 words are the fulcrum of the entire reflection.
They really are. Everything before them establishes the impossible weight of her burden. Everything after them reveals the reality of her endurance.
Let's look closely at the specific trio of trials the text lists. It doesn't rely on vague platitudes about, hard times.
It gets very specific.
It names the mechanisms of her suffering. Whispers, doubts, pain.
Let's take those one by one, because they each represent a completely different vector of psychological attack.
Let's start with the whispers.
Whispers points directly to the external societal environment. It implies judgment, misunderstanding, and rumor.
And we know how destructive that can be.
Well, evolutionary psychology tells us that human beings are hypersocial creatures. For our ancient ancestors, being ostracized from the tribe meant literal death.
Right, you get kicked out, you starve.
Exactly. Because of that, our brains process social rejection and societal judgment using the exact same neural pathways that process physical pain.
So a whisper actually hurts.
Literally, neurologically, it hurts. When someone is on a path that is meant for something bigger, that path rarely conforms to the comfortable norms of the community. So the community talks. They whisper.
Oh, absolutely. You can just imagine the neighborhood gossip, people thinking the child is delusional or the parent is dangerously negligent.
Why isn't she controlling him?
Yeah. Why does she let him behave this way? Why can't they just be a normal family and keep their heads down?
The whispers are the constant, insidious hum of societal disapproval. To stay through the whispers means she had to develop a profound tolerance for social alienation.
She had to be okay with being the outcast.
She had to weigh the evolutionary drive to belong to her community against the maternal drive to stand by her son, and she chose her son. She accepted the status of an outsider.
But then the attack moves from the outside in. It goes from external whispers to internal doubts.
This is my favorite part of the text.
It is completely fascinating because it entirely shatters that museum glass we talked about earlier.
It shatters the marble.
Exactly. We have this collective habit of associating great historical figures with unshakable, bulletproof confidence. We like to think they just knew, with 100% certainty, that they were right at all times.
The symbol doesn't have doubts. The symbol is resolute and unwavering.
But the text deliberately includes doubts as a core, inescapable part of her journey. It explicitly tells us that staying didn't mean she was free from internal questioning.
It levels the playing field.
It suggests she suffered from the exact same cognitive distortions we all do. She probably thought, did I get this all wrong? Is this really the right path? Am I failing him as a mother by letting this happen?
This is a crucial point about the psychology of devotion. True devotion and true courage is never the absence of doubt.
Right. If you have no doubt, it's easy.
If you are entirely certain of the outcome, there is no courage required to stay. Courage is feeling the doubt, hearing that internal imposter syndrome whispering that you made a catastrophic mistake, feeling the urge to run away and protect yourself, and consciously choosing to stay anyway. By
Wow.
including doubts, the source radically humanizes her.
She wasn't just coasting on divine certainty, she was white-knuckling it through intense human uncertainty.
Exactly. And then we arrive at the culmination of the trio.
The pain.
The whispers are the external attack, the doubts are the internal erosion, the pain is the absolute synthesis of both, manifesting into real, visceral agony as the inevitable hardship finally arrives.
And the text frames her staying not as passive victimization, but as a fiercely active, courageous choice of endurance.
She wasn't a victim of circumstance.
No. She was an active participant who continuously chose to remain present in the center of absolute devastation.
Which naturally leads us to the ultimate question: how?
Right. How do you survive that?
How do you endure a gauntlet of societal whispers, internal doubts, and visceral pain, especially when you don't even fully understand the grand design behind it all?
To survive that requires a highly specific psychological framework, which brings us to the text's final and arguably its most challenging conclusion. It completely redefines the concept of faith.
It takes a word that modern society often uses very cheaply and restores its tremendous heavy gravity.
The final lines of the text read, "She didn't understand everything, but she trusted." Because sometimes faith isn't about having answers. Sometimes it's about holding on, even when your heart is breaking.
We really need to unpack how radically this contrasts with our modern definition of faith.
It turns it upside down.
It does. Society often frames faith as a purely intellectual exercise. We equate it with having absolute certainty or having all the answers neatly lined up in a row.
Like it's an equation to solve.
Exactly. And worse, we often conflate faith with toxic positivity. This idea that everything happens for a reason, so I shouldn't feel sad or angry.
Yes. The pressure to just smile through trauma because you're supposed to have faith that it's all part of a plan.
Just look on the bright side.
It's so damaging.
The source material powerfully argues the exact opposite of that toxic positivity. It says explicitly, she didn't understand everything.
She's in the dark.
She did not have the grand, cosmic spreadsheet laid out in front of her explaining exactly why every single ounce of this suffering was strictly necessary.
So it argues that faith actually lives in the precise space where human understanding completely fails.
Yes.
Sometimes faith isn't about having answers. Sometimes it's about holding on, even when your heart is breaking. So what does this all mean? I want you to really let that definition sink in.
Think about your own life.
Yeah, think about times in your own life where you were plunged into a situation you didn't ask for. A sudden medical crisis, the loss of a job, a profound grief, a total upending of the reality you thought you knew.
Situations where the why is entirely unavailable to you no matter how hard you search for.
Exactly. You lacked the answers.
Yeah.
The universe was completely silent, refusing to explain itself to you.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And if you define faith as having the answers or understanding the plan, then in those moments of dark confusion, you would feel like you have lost your faith. You would feel like a spiritual or emotional failure.
Because you don't get the joke.
Right. But look at how this text changes that entire paradigm. It defines faith strictly as emotional endurance in the face of a breaking heart.
It is not an intellectual knowing. It is a desperate, bloody-knuckled trust.
It revolutionizes the way we view emotional resilience.
It completely removes the immense pressure to understand our trauma while we are still trapped inside it.
That's such a relief, honestly.
The text suggests that you don't need to understand the grand design to have faith. All you need to do is refuse to let go.
Just hold on.
Holding on, staying present, refusing to abandon the people you love, even when the situation is tearing you apart. That is the highest possible expression of faith, according to this source.
It frames faith as grit, faith as pure staying power.
She didn't stay because she had all the theological answers.
She stayed because she was a mother, and her son needed her to be there, even if she was entirely powerless to stop his pain.
And in making that argument, the text fully completes its mission.
Yeah.
It has taken the symbol, the pristine marble statue behind the museum glass, and breathed the messy, chaotic reality of life back into it.
It made her real again.
It has given us a portrait of a woman who navigated the absolute outer limits of human psychological endurance, driven by a maternal love that proves stronger than her terror of the unknown.
It is an incredible paradigm-shifting perspective, and as we begin to wrap up this deep dive, I want us to intentionally let the pacing slow down even further.
Just take a breath.
Let the weight of the psychology we've talked about today really settle around you.
It is a profound amount of emotional weight to carry, but it serves as an incredible lens through which to view not just this specific historical figure, but the staggering capacity of the human heart in general.
It really is. Today, we took a journey through a very short but incredibly dense piece of writing.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We watched as the source material took a universally recognized symbol and successfully transformed her back into a living, breathing, terrified, and fiercely devoted mother.
We brought her down from the pedestal.
We explored how she navigated that terrifying intersection of profound love, inevitable loss, and heartbreaking trust. We looked at the biological agony of anticipatory grief, the paralyzing helplessness of watching a loved one walk a difficult path, and the immense courage it takes to simply stay put when every instinct inside you is screaming to run.
We moved away from the sanitized theology of the icon, and we stepped into the raw psychology of the mother.
We did. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over entirely on your own as you go about the rest of your day or as you drift off to sleep tonight.
Oh, final reflection.
Yeah, it's a thought strictly rooted in what this text claims about the true nature of endurance. If true faith is, as the text claims, the act of simply holding on while your heart is breaking, then perhaps our moments of deepest pain, our moments of total confusion and lack of understanding aren't signs that we are failing.
They aren't failures at all.
Perhaps those dark, messy, unanswerable moments in our lives are actually the exact forge where our greatest strength is being made. We started this deep dive talking about how much we prefer the clean, flawless marble statues of history.
Because they're safe.
But maybe the real masterpiece isn't the finished stone. Maybe the masterpiece is the fact that someone, in the midst of all that mess and pain and crushing doubt, just kept holding on to the chisel